Yeah.
This is it.
Good evening. This is a continuance of the regularly scheduled meeting of the Warren Planning Board. We continued it from last Monday because of difficulties with the live streaming, which is required under Rhode Island state law. The agenda tonight is specifically on the proposal before us. It is, you'll bear with me. The master plan approval, comprehensive permit application, AP2 lots 21 through 23, 113, 119, plus 125 Water Street. The owner applicant is 119 Water Holding LLC. To help you understand where we're going to go tonight, this meeting is part of the master plan. That's the first step in any development that comes up. Our intent here is to provide you with information about the proposal from the developer. Prior to that, we're going to have Bob Ruley, the planning director, talk a bit about affordable housing, the nature of that, because this is a comprehensive permit that the developer is applying under. That will be followed by comment from the public. We would ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes each. If you feel that if someone has said something that you agree with, I would ask you to simply say, I agree with what that person said prior to. Otherwise, the meeting just goes on and on. There's no reason to repeat ourselves. That said, once the public comment period is done, we will end the meeting and we'll meet again. This will give the board time to take into consideration what has been said by the developer, also by the public. So that's the process. We ask you to be, as always, polite and respectful. We value your time. I hope you value ours. Our goal on the planning board is to do the best we can for the town of Warren and for its residents. So in that spirit, we move forward. We're not on any timetable at this point. So we want to be as careful as possible in terms of moving this process forward and as thoughtful as we can be. So I'm going to have Bob.
I just want to clarify that after my presentation, the applicant's team will make their presentation, then the public will have an opportunity to comment.
Okay. What he said. All right. We will have, by the way, there are a number of waivers that have to do with height, that have to do with parking, that have to do with the demolition. All of those waivers will be handled at the next meeting. We're not going to take any action on those waivers at this point. So that's important to know. So again, what we're asking is for your thoughtful comments. Once you've understand what it is that we're dealing with here, because it is a fairly complex process and one that the planning board has not had a lot of experience with, the comprehensive permit process. So, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application is what is referred to as a comprehensive permit application. This is subject to state statute. It's Rhode Island General Law 4553, Low and Moderate Income Housing Act. One of the provisions of that act, although it's hardly being met, is that communities are required to have at least 10% of their year-round housing deed restricted for a minimum of 30 years. There are less than 9 communities out of the 39 within Rhode Island that meet that requirement. I always find it interesting that Block Island does meet that, but it's very difficult for deed restricted for any community to meet that. But nonetheless, that is the ordinance or the statute that exists. Go next slide. So under the comprehensive permit application, there are required findings of fact that the planning board has to meet. And they are that the proposed development is consistent with local needs as identified in the local comprehensive community plan, with a particular emphasis on community affordable housing. We are updating our comprehensive plan, but the existing comprehensive plan from 2009 suggests that there's a need to create affordable housing. The second is that the proposed development is in compliance with the standards and provisions of the municipality zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, and where expressly varied or waived, local concerns that have been affected by the relief granted do not outweigh the state and local need for low and moderate income housing. And the emphasis is on low and moderate income housing. Third is that all low moderate income housing units within this project are the same as the market rate units, and that is what is being proposed. Fourth is that there's no significant environmental impacts from the development as shown on the final plan. Fifth is that there are no negative impacts to health and safety of the current or future residents of the community in areas included but not limited to the circulation of pedestrian and vehicular traffic, provision of emergency services, sewage, availability of potable water, adequate water runoff, preservation of natural, historic, cultural features that contribute to the attractiveness of the community. Fifth is that all proposed developments and all subdivisions will have adequate and permanent physical access to the public street. That is true. And the last is that the development will not result in the creation of individual lots with any physical constraints to development. That is not a case. I also want to point out that under the statute, the local review board in this case is the planning board. So in this case, the planning board serves as the voluntary historic district commission, the planning board, the zoning board, and the town council. Next slide. So where is Warren in relative to meeting the 10%? Way, way far away. We're never going to get there, and most communities won't. We actually went backwards from 2020 to 2021. We're at 4.23% now. We have 213 units that are deed restricted. That reduction in units from 2020 to 2021 is because we lost a group home. And even at the state level, the state is not, as an entire state, has not reached to 10%. They're at 8.3. Next percent. So affordable housing is a term that I wish we wouldn't use anymore because I think it's a misnomer and there's a lot of misinformation about what affordable housing is. By HUD standards, affordable housing is if a household is cost burdened, that they spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs, they're a house burdened. So in 2020, we had 2007 units of housing that or properties that were cost burdened. In 2021, it was 1655. So 44% of the households in Warren are cost burdened based on HUD standards. Total number of households as of the 2020 census was 4,992. The number of households at below 80% of area median income or 2,200. So this is another frustration that I have, is that these calculations are based on area median income. Area median income for the Warren area is $99,600. Not my calculations. That's the state and HUD's calculations. You go to the next slide. And this is an important thing to understand because this impacts how these applications are looked at. So I've heard, not from a lot of people, but I mean, in the wind that, this was going to be a certain type of project. This is not a Section 8 project. Section 8 is a federal program. This is not a federal program. The letter of eligibility, which is required for an application like this to move forward from Rhode Island Housing, is saying that all but 2 of the 17 units in this project need to be affordable at 80% of area median income. So in order to maintain that, the developer is required to retain a housing monitor to make sure that residents are at 80% or below of area median income. That is a 30-year requirement that it be that, but it's not a Section 8 project. So what does that mean? Next slide. So 80% of area median income is $79,680. 80% of area median income. That is 90% of the people that work in this building on a day-to-day basis. Because the average household income in Warren is $82,155. The median household income, median being 50% or less, 50% or more, is $64,182. This is based on the 2020 census. People below the poverty rate in Warren are 941. That's a decrease of 20%. People above the poverty rate are 9,300 plus. That's a 2.6% increase. So the point I'm trying to make is when we're talking about affordable housing, and I hate the term affordable housing, I think it should be mixed income housing, is that the way that the state is calculating affordable housing, the way that Rhode Island Housing calculates affordable housing, really, and I'm editorializing for a minute, is not addressing the problem. So if we go to the next slide, we saw a slight decrease in the number of households that we had in Warren in 2021. The median income in Warren, that we just saw what the area median income was in over 90,000. The median income in Warren is just under $60,000. So there's a gap of almost $30,000. The median single family home price in Warren increased 15.4% because of COVID from 20 to 2021. The income needed for a family to afford that is $94,961. The average 2-bedroom rent increased by 17.3% from $1,632 to $1,973. The income required to support that kind of rent is $78,920. So if we look at the HUD income limits, you're considered low income if you make $55,150 for one person. And we just identified that $59,000 is what the median income is. So, I think it's important that when we're talking about affordable housing, we understand what we're talking about and that people comprehend that police officers, teachers, EMS people, these are all people that fall into these categories that can't afford to live in Warren. As you can tell, I have some frustration about what our housing policies are. I had an opportunity to testify before the Special Legislative Committee in December of last year. When I finished, you would have thought that I had discovered penicillin in terms of what people's reaction was. And since then, no one's reached out to me to say, what is Warren doing? what can we do different? How can we address this? Which is somewhat frustrating to me. I'll go to the last slide, but we are doing things to address this. We're in the process of updating the comprehensive plan. We expect that that's going to be completed by the end of this calendar year. That will go to the council for approval, then it will go to statewide planning. And one of the things that we're doing to try to reduce that 10% is rezone the Metacom Avenue corridor. We think there's opportunities for higher density development on many different sites there. We're adopting something called form-based code, where we would give density bonuses for developers that would give us more, what I would call mixed income housing. If they didn't want to give us the housing, but they wanted to have the density, we'd ask them to give a contribution to our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which has been stood up. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund has been meeting on a monthly basis. We've allocated some ARPA funds to assist those property owners in the downtown area that have vacant second and third floors to convert those to residential housing. We would be could be a soft first or a soft second, but we understand that this is a problem statewide. I don't want to rely on the state of Rhode Island to help us work through this. I think that there are things that we can do, but understand that right now that this application is within the requirements of the state statute that exists. We have no ability to adjust what that statute is. For whatever reason, this wasn't approved. The applicant has an opportunity to appeal this to the State Housing Appeal Board. And I mean, I want everyone to keep an open mind in terms of not saying that this is fait accompli tonight, but just understand that affordable housing is a very complicated issue for every community and a very complicated issue for Warren. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And if we could have the developer presentation, I understand there'd be a number of folks who will be speaking to this.
Testing. Is that loud enough? Folks can hear me? Okay. I'm sorry? Too loud. Okay. Okay. Better to be too loud than too soft. Thank you, Chair and members of the board. Thank you, planning staff. It's really for that presentation, and technical folks for getting this meeting up and running in light of the glitches last week. My name is Brett Yadley. I'm an attorney with Chase Ruttenberg and Friedman in Providence, Rhode Island. As the chair indicated, we're here for the master plan for the comprehensive permit for the applicant 119 Water Holding LLC. Also here with me this evening will be two witnesses, Julie Bartlett of ZDS Architecture and Joseph Casali of Joseph Casali Engineering, the project engineer. I'd like to give just a very brief presentation. I'll introduce the witnesses. We'll have a relatively brief presentation. After that, I'd like to ask Mr. Casali some questions, and then I'll finish with a very brief summary. As you know, this property contains two structures. It's not a surprise that the building is in poor condition, and the amount of work required to fix those conditions is immense and frankly not feasible. That's well documented. The property, as members of this board may be aware, the property had been for sale in the past, and due to the problems with the structure, there were no takers until this applicant came along with a vision to improve the property, to activate the streetscape, all at the same time while providing the town with an opportunity to further its mission for affordable housing. Now, a couple of important points that I'd like you to keep in the back of your minds as you listen to the presentation this evening. The uses proposed by the applicant are permittable in this zone. And furthermore, as illustrated by the slides earlier, at least 25% of the residential units will comply with the Affordable Housing Act. So all in all, as you'll understand from the testimony tonight, this is a good project. It checks a number of boxes, okay? It advances the town's comprehensive plan. It advances the mission of the town's affordable housing guidelines. And it will revitalize the property with a robust presence that will add to the already existing character of Water Street and that neighborhood. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Casali to discuss the project in general. Can we borrow that mic just real quickly? Well, not. Just in case. Need that in a second. So, Mr. Casali, please introduce yourself, give us a brief description of your educational background and work experience, if you would.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just for the record, my name is Joe Casali. I'm a registered professional engineer with offices at 300 Post Road in Warwick. 300 Post Road in Warwick. In terms of educational experience, I have a civil engineering degree in both environmental and civil engineering from URI. I also have an MBA from URI. I have reciprocity in multiple states, including Rhode Island, Massachusetts. I've been running Joe Casali Engineering. This is our 20th year, and this is my 30th year in practice.
And have you presented before other zoning and planning boards in the past?
Yes, I believe I've been qualified as an expert in almost every community, in front of almost every planning, zoning board, and even Superior Court.
So at this time, I'd like to present applicant's Exhibit A, Mr. Casali's resume, and ask that he be recognized by this board as an expert in design and planning, design, and zoning.
In terms of recognizing someone as an expert, that doesn't preclude the possibility of, our engineering firm coming in and providing that.
Being recognized not only by Superior Court, by other boards throughout the state, as he stated, would be my recommendation with this board. We recognize him as an expert based on those two things alone, in addition to his experience in his education.
Okay, would we need to make a motion to accept that?
Correct, correct.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I need to revise my request.
Sure.
I need to strike my request and ask that Mr. Casali be recognized as an expert in engineering and zoning.
Is that what you testified in that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, could I have a motion? Jim, second. Ashley, second. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Thank you.
And
You can enter that into the record.
just to pass. Ready to proceed?
Sure.
Mr. Casali, have you reviewed the relevant aspects of the comprehensive plan and the town of Warren zoning ordinance?
Yes, I have.
And have you reviewed this zoning application?
Yes, I have.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Casali to present the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. If I may, just a quick PowerPoint presentation. Julie Bartlett, who's a registered architect in the state of Rhode Island, she's an associate with ZDS of Providence, Rhode Island, is also going to, chime in, Mr. Chairman. So, sorry, I do want to qualify the first here.
Sorry, just for flow, I'm going to ask Ms. Bartlett a few questions and ask that she be recognized as an expert as well. Ms. Bartlett, can you please introduce yourself, give us a little bit about your educational background and work history?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, my name
You
is.
want to lean in.
My name is Julie Bartlett. I am a licensed architect. I have a Bachelor of Science in Architecture and a Master's of Architecture from Northeastern University. I've been working professionally for about 15 years, licensed for the past, I believe, 5, and working for ZDS as an associate and a senior project manager for the last 7.
And Ms. Bartlett, have you testified before other zoning and planning boards and commissions?
Yes,
Approximately how many times?
more than a dozen.
And are you familiar with the town of Warren's zoning ordinance and the requirements for the comprehensive permit?
Yes.
So at this time, I'd like to ask that Ms. Bartlett be recognized as an expert in architectural design.
Got Jim and Mike, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Okay.
present applicants to the D.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just in terms of where we are in the community, obviously, everybody is familiar with Main Street, Water Street, Sisson, and specifically the 2 lots that we're here before you tonight, Assessors Plat 2, lots 21 and 23. When we look closely at the parcels, they're right at the corner of Water and Sisson. You can see the existing property line. They're both relatively the same size, just shy of about 11,000 square feet. Lot 21 has the address of 119 Water Street, and lot 23, the address of 125 Water Street. Both of them in the same ownership, LLCs, with the separation of the address. In terms of the building envelope, that orange dash box that just came up before you, you can see that there are pre-existing non-conforming conditions to some of the existing dwellings. That is showing the 20-foot rear yard setback, the 15-foot front yard, and the 10-foot side yard setback. One of the encumbrances with this property is it's actually in a FEMA flood zone. It's in an AE zone, A designating that it's not in the velocity zone. The E element is that FEMA has determined the base flood elevation in terms of mean sea level for this lot. That is the depth of which it would come up along that western front. You'll see that all of the buildings proposed will be well above the flood elevation. In terms of the locale, the existing water dog kitchen and bar is here to remain. 113 Water Street is proposed to be raised, as is the 3-story mixed-use structure to be raised. And I'd like to ask Julie to come up and speak more in terms of the architectural reasons as to why the team decided rehab wasn't just economically feasible.
Thank you, Joe. So as many of you are familiar with the lot in the plan, you'll see that aerial photo. It outlines in red this lot in the lot in red is the lot in question today. The photos show the existing building on Water Street in the green existing structure, the building in the rear of the lot, which is the bottom left corner, and then the top right image is both buildings along Water Street. We had, due to the condition of the exterior of the building, we had both a structural engineer analysis and a contractor look at this project. The foundations are in poor condition, the walls are bowing, there is a rot in the exterior walls, and the foundation in particular needs significant repair to restructure this to make it safe. The building and fire departments have both been in this building and have only deemed 2 of the units that are currently in the building to be livable. for a period of time, which is being reevaluated, which will be reevaluated. We have submitted a structural report and these images in the past as already to your.
So in terms of what we're proposing, in addition to raising those two existing building, there is a proposed 4-story mixed-use building. 17 of the units are proposed to be residential, 14 of them are 1-bedroom, 3 are 2-bedroom, and then there's also a commercial unit, and we'll get into that program in a minute. So you can see that building. Go ahead, Julie, why don't you run through that architectural program?
Sure, so this is showing an architectural site plan in red. This is the commercial unit anchoring Water Street. We're proposing aligning with the street despite the 10-foot setback or 15-foot setback that's on water, that is required on Water Street. And also trying to sort of create a pathway in between the two lots to activate the public space between the two structures. The residential lobby is in tan. And I'm actually going to go to the next slide because it enlarges it a little bit. It's our residential lobby with some utility rooms, access to stair and elevator, and access to 2 1-bedroom units on the ground floor. Going upstairs, this is the plan of the 2nd and 3rd floor plans. We have 4 1-bedroom units per floor, 2 stairs as required by code and an elevator. And the darker blue shade is the 2-bedroom unit that's located on the Water Street side. The 4th story is in a mansard roof. So the roof line steps in a little bit. So our square footages are slightly reduced, but we're very conscious to try to keep the same layout and configuration as possible. Architecturally, our elevations, we tried to respond to the context of the neighborhood. And we tried to be sensitive to the materiality. So our thought is to use some kind of a lap siding, like a fiber cement, like a hardy type lap siding on the majority of the building. The mansard roof with some dormers on the 4th story. And the first story would be windows, storefront style windows with trim and paneling with a granite base to indicate activity on the 1st floor. These are 2 elevations of the rear of the building, showing that we would be sort of removing some of that storefront as we have the residential units, keeping the lap siding, and where we are able to, proposing a handful of small balconies for these units facing the rear and north. Here's a street elevation showing the building relative to Tourister, which you can see in the bottom site section, and then on the top site section, showing the relativity on Water Street in comparison to some of the other buildings on the street. And this is a rendering on Water Street facing north.
Can we be respectful, please? We're going to listen to you. Please listen to them.
Indicating the palette of colors. We're looking for a neutral palette, something, again, hardy style lap siding, trim, paneling, tried to be sensitive to the detailing at the banding at the ground floor and at the mansard at the roof, responding to some of the other detailing we've recognized in historic neighborhoods.
Thank you, Julie. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope you have at least a general understanding of how much thought ZBS has put into this to have a brand new building that still wants to fit into such a historic and old community as where we are on Water Street. So in terms of the site plan, the building has been sited, of course, out of the flood zone. As Julie spoke of, you can see that interior corridor, which is really concrete sidewalk to promote that pedestrian access between the mixed-use building and the cafe. In terms of parking, there's 22 stall parking lot with 1 ADA accessible stall and 2 electric vehicles. In terms of, I believe that is, that is a 25 stall parking lot. in total with the ADA spot and the 2 electric vehicles. We'll get into all the variances in specificity in a minute. You can see the proposed dumpster enclosure that's going to have privacy slats. We anticipate the truck access from Sisson. We've got temporary loading spaces in the area. Transformer pads have been cited. Stormwater management in terms of this property. Most of this is impervious area, and being in a flood zone, the stormwater is not much about attenuation as it is about just that first flush of water and improving the water quality before it leaves the site. We have bike racks that have been scribed into the program. And then in terms of utilities, being in such an urban corridor, it's relatively straightforward. We have existing sewer laterals. We've got gas mains within the street, water mains for both domestic and fire protection. And then in terms of the variances, I'd like to quickly just go through them, and then we can go them much deeper, Mr. Chairman, but there's 9 of them. You have a front yard setback. You have a side yard setback. Building lot coverage or building coverage, the height of the building, the impervious coverage being 85%, parking, the size of the spaces, and I'll specify, and also in terms of the amount of landscape islands that are required. So in terms of permitting, we were before your TRC back in August. We're here before you tonight for our master plan approval, but we still have a long way to go, as you know. Should we receive approval tonight, we still have to go to the CRMC for our assent, DEM for our water quality certification, back for our domestic and fire protection in front of the water authority, water and sewer department, and then back before you, the planning board acting in the capacity of the local board of review for preliminary. And then, of course, we still have final plan. But just to get into the variances to show them what it is we're asking you to look at. As you know, the front yard needs to be 15 feet off of Water Street. We're putting that building right up to Water Street. So we're asking for all of it 15 feet. It's part of the basis of the design that you want the storefronts to be right in front of where the pedestrians are walking. I think older school of design was you had that massive parking lot in front of the building. We're trying to change that here. Also, in terms of the side yard setback, 10 feet is required. We have 4.2. We are respectfully requesting 5.8 feet of relief from that side yard setback. Again, we are the predominant owner of the property next door that side yard setback would affect. In terms of building coverage, 30% is required by code. That building is just over 41.5%. So we're requesting dimensional relief about 11.4%. In terms of the height, as you all know, Mr. Chairman, the largest building in the village business district is 35 feet. Proposed before you is 51.67, asking for relief of 16.67. 5 is impervious lot coverage. In terms of the code, 65% is allowed. We're proposing 85 dimension relief for 20%. Parking is I know an area of concern. 39 spaces would be required. So that would be 1.5 space for every 17 residential units. This being about an 18,500 square foot commercial space. Your code requires 4 per 1,000. That would be about 13 additional spaces. So we need 39 spaces. We're proposing 24. The 25, excuse me. The basis for that design is we would have 19 of these spaces for each one of the 19 beds in the residential program. And then we would have the remaining 6 for commercial. So we're still asking for 14 spaces of relief. We just wanted to give you a little bit of basis of design as to where the design team is coming from. And of course, this does include the one of those spaces per the ADA code has to be to that ADA federal requirement. Size of the parking space in Warren, what is required is 270 square foot for a parking space. We're proposing 261, relief requested of 9, meaning we have a more conventional 24 feet in between the parking aisle. I think you require 25 feet. We couldn't make that with the program. Lastly, last two landscaping. 10% of the interior parking needs to be landscaped. We're not proposing interior landscaping. We're requesting the full relief, Mr. Chairman, of 10%. Lastly, in terms of parking lot islands, 2 are required per your code. We are proposing just 1. We're asking for relief of 1 island. We've also laid out different areas within the community that show the local bus stops as well as the public parking areas. You can see that we have a Drifter bus stop, which is about a 4-minute walk. We have a variety of public parking lots, anywhere from a couple of minutes to 5 to 10 to upwards of 9 to 10 spaces right here at Town Hall. I know that was a lot. Julie and I would be happy.
Can we keep it down back there, please? I would expect the same kind of respect when you speak as you would give to our presenters. Thank you.
Yeah, is this on? Yeah, I just have a few questions for Mr. Casali. I'd like to just run through some of the comprehensive permit requirements. Mr. Casali, is the proposed development consistent with local needs as identified in the local comprehensive plan, especially as it relates to the affordable housing plan?
Yeah, I think that was evident, as you saw in the planner's initial presentation, the need for affordable housing in this community.
And is the development in compliance with the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations?
It is, with exception to the 9 requests that we just outlined.
Sure, as it relates to those elements of the ordinance that would require relief, do the local concerns that have been affected by the relief granted outweigh the state and local need for affordable housing?
And so this is why that this application is filed as a comprehensive permit and is in front of this local, this planning board acting as the local board of review, because under that mandate, under that statute, you have the ability to supersede local planning and zoning codes.
Thank you. And are the affordable housing units proposed integrated throughout the development?
They are. There's one large building. This isn't a campus like project. So yes, they are all within that building. It would be impossible not to build them together.
Okay. And are the affordable housing units compatible in scale and architectural style to the market rate units within the project?
They are, because there's so many being proposed. They are all integrated. Again, 14 1-bedroom and 3 2-bedroom units.
Thank you. Will the affordable housing units be built and occupied prior to or simultaneous with the construction and occupancy of any market rate units?
They need to be by law simultaneous, and they will be. Again, it's simple in this nature in this project because it's one large building.
Thank you. Will there be any significant negative environmental impacts from the proposed development?
No, and we will return at the preliminary plan stage with all of our permits from water, sewer, CRMC, and DEM.
Thank you. Will there be any negative significant impacts on the health and safety of current or future residents of the community?
No, again, we need to return with those 4 state and local permits to affirm that statement.
And does that hold true with respect to safe circulation of pedestrian and vehicular traffic?
That's correct. The site is laid out in accordance with standard practices for vehicular and pedestrian movements.
Will there be any negative impacts with respect to emergency services?
No, part of the process is we will coordinate with the local fire marshal for emergency services. You can see that the building has fire protection and it will have sprinklers throughout.
As negative impacts as a result of potable water a concern here?
No, the building's proposed to have domestic water.
And what about negative impacts with respect to adequate surface water runoff?
Yes, we will have drainage will be proposed and approved at your local level by the town engineer or a designee that you set forward, and will also be approved at the state level by both CRMC and DEM.
And will the project have adequate and permanent physical access to a public street in accordance with the requirements of the comp permit?
Yeah, it's sited on 2 public streets as we laid out in the presentation.
Will the development result in the creation of individual lots with any physical constraints to development?
No, none of these lots will be landlocked. They will all have frontage on a town or a state roadway.
And according to your understanding, is the town meeting its affordable housing needs?
No, I believe the requirement was 10%. And as you saw in the planner's initial presentation, this town, like many others, are low of that 10%.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier a technical review committee meeting. When was that meeting held?
I believe that was August 2nd.
And did I'm going to call it the TRC, to shorten it. Did the TRC have any concerns? Did they raise any concerns at that meeting?
The only concern that was raised was relative to a canopy that was proposed on Water Street at the front elevation, which we removed and modified the front elevation of the design to conform to the requests of the TRC.
Okay, so according to your understanding, the issues and concerns of the TRC have been addressed.
Correct.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, are there any questions of you or members of the board?
One quick question. At the beginning, it was indicated that at least 25% of these units would be considered affordable, but prior to this, we were told that it would be 15 of the 17 units would be designated affordable.
Mr. Chair, I think under the comprehensive permit application process, a minimum of 25% is required. This applicant has increased what the available units are. So under any comprehensive permit.
Yeah, I understand the 25%.
I mean, you saw the letter of eligibility that says that, I mean, that's what's been submitted. So they need
We're
to.
submitting 15 of the 17
Right,
units.
I wanted that to be on the record.
Correct.
Right.
88% of the units will be affordable.
Thank you.
And I just, are you guys done?
Yes.
So I just want to talk about. So the applicant can apply for a demolition permit today, tomorrow, the next day. Whenever they do that, that will require that the building official advise me that the application has been filed. I will then advise the Historic District Commission that an application has been filed. They will have 30 days to issue a report and recommendation to you, acting as a town council, as to whether they agree or disagree that this building should be demolished. So I just want to have that on the record.
Right. And again, as noted at the beginning of the meeting, on the advice of legal counsel, we will not be acting on any of the waivers at this meeting. That would include that demolition permit process, which, by the way, takes 30 days and can be extended beyond the 30 days at the discretion of the planning board.
And just for the record, the applicant would ask for a waiver of the demo permit at tonight's meeting, subject to approval of the master plan application.
And again, I think what our process here is, we'd like to hear. Now, I asked.
Mr.
that-
Chairman, I would just want to add one last thing to this. So we have received their structural report. We have referred their structural report to the town's consulting engineer for peer review. So in that intervening 30 days, another set of eyes will look at the structural analysis and report that the applicant has provided.
At this point, I would invite members of the public to come up in an orderly manner. You are required to identify yourself, first and last name, where you live, and then take no more than 3 minutes to present your concerns, support, opposition to the development as presented. We will then take that information under consideration. The planning board will more than likely have questions that we need answered, which will be taken on by more than likely the town staff in terms of being able to understand our level of flexibility, our determinations that can be made based on this. So, yes,
Mr. Chair, you need a motion to open the public meeting.
okay.
And just to clarify, I do reserve the ability to make a brief summary. I can either do that after the public comment or before, whatever.
I would do it afterwards. Could I have a motion to open this to a public meeting? Mike Gerhard made the motion, Jim Patterson supporting it. All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. If someone would like to come forward, you have to speak into the microphone. Please, thanks.
My name is Anthony Guida. I live at 165 Water Street. I'm about 7 houses away from the proposed area. And my question is, that if there's supposed to be parking for, let me see, I'm trying to find it. Bear with me. So the overall parking required is 39 spaces. And the proposed parking is 25. You're asking for 15 parking spaces of relief. I guess that means they're gonna park somewhere. I'd like to know where. I'm all done.
Great, thank you. Next.
I'm Joseph Gilberti. I live at 19 Sisson Street, which is the 4-family house at the end of Sisson Street on the right, just behind the water dog. I'd like to talk a little bit about what I've seen on a firsthand basis about what the traffic is like on Sisson Street and Water Street, just because of the water dog today, and we can go from there. They have that outdoor seating, which I presume was added during COVID, probably added a lot of seats to their restaurant, maybe double the number of seats. It's a very popular restaurant, a lot of people coming and going. And when they made that outdoor seating, they made it so that traffic has to come down Sisson Street in order to park in their parking lot. And so all the traffic funnels down Sisson Street, the lot gets full. People come down to the end of the street. They do a 5-point turn, even though there's big dead end signs. They pull into my driveway, they pull into the neighbor's driveway. My neighbor had their taillight get smashed by somebody turning around there. People park on the street all the time. We've had people park in the parking in the driveway for number 15 Sisson Street And the person just assumes it's a parking space, doesn't look like a parking space. They will just park and go into the restaurant. They'll park on the no parking side of the street, go into the restaurant. People will leave their cars with the blinkers on in basically blocking traffic. You can't get around it while they go in and pick up their takeout order. And if they gotta wait a few minutes, you wait while they come back out of their car. Also, the delivery trucks are coming in and out of there all the time, these big box trucks. And they will also park in the street and block the street. I have witnessed my neighbor waiting to get out of their driveway because a box truck was parked there for 10 minutes. And we went and spoke to the driver and he said, oh, well, you know, it's late and I got to get this done. And they don't care. The current proposal says that deliveries will be made to the area at the long end of that new parking lot, as if they're going to pull in these big box trucks and go all the way down to the end of that parking lot and then deliver their goods to the restaurant. They're just going to park in the street like they always do, because it's right next to the entrance on the Water Dog building where they bring goods in to be delivered. The other problem that no one has really mentioned, the last gentleman mentioned that you're 15 spaces short. Where are those people going to go? We already know they kind of park where they don't belong and cause a lot of problems for the residents of Sisson Street. No one's mentioned that space behind the Water Dog currently has 12 spaces that are used for the Water Dog. And those spaces are going to be reallocated to this new building. And so there will be no parking for the Water Dog, a very popular restaurant that people come to Thursday through Sunday. That place is hopping and it's great. I love to see that. I'm not against the development of Water Street. I think it's good. I want to see more business down there. I want to see the restaurants. It's a good thing. I think that real consideration needs to be taken to the practical implications of trying to force this much traffic down Sisson Street and into that parking lot that is already insufficient for the building that's proposed, and takes away another 12 spots that are used all the time. On a weekend, you won't be able to get in and out of Sisson Street. I don't know if I'm at my 3 minutes. I have lots of other concerns.
Well, there you are, and I think you've made, good points.
So I agree. Where are the cars going to go?
Okay.
And well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Jenny Flanagan, 46 Washington Street, 46 Washington Street. First, I beg this board not to waive the demo permit application process. It seems to me that part of the comprehensive plan statute includes a preservation of historic structures, and or at least acknowledgement that there's a historic component to what's going on. And by granting a waiver of that process, you're short-circuiting that part of the statute that I think should be acknowledged. This is part of the site is in a flood zone, and they've built outside the site. And while I realize it's not part of the current zoning ordinance, the town is going to see 3 to 5 feet of sea level rise by the end of the 30-year term of these affordable housing units. And by the end of the term of any mortgage that would be lent on this property. And on top of that, there may be a 100-year storm that we just saw what happened in Florida with a hurricane that did tremendous flooding. What would happen on this site with 3 feet of sea level rise by the end of the term of this project? And a storm on top of that they say is a 100-year storm that we're seeing every 10 years now. The biggest problem I have with this, which unfortunately is not a health and safety issue, which is what can turn down this, is the massing of this project on Water Street. They're comparing it to Tourister. Tourister in this location, 99 Water Street next to Tourister, does not face Water Street. I heard all the chuckles in the room when they showed the streetscape, and it's twice as high as all the other structures. I would encourage you not to get rid of the landscaping buffers. I again wonder where, like everyone else has asked, where all the commercial parking is going. And even if you do reduce the parking spaces, don't skimp on the others' parking standards. I think the aisle widths need to be there. I think that they need to be full-size parking spaces. I think it needs all the handicap spaces, particularly if these are quote unquote affordable units. It's more likely that the affordable unit user is going to be low to moderate income, and because they're handicapped, and they will need that parking space. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thanks.
Bradley Vogeltons. I am the owner of 7 Summer Street, and also owner on record with my ex-wife, Kelly Vogeltons of 11 Summer Street. And I'd like to also make some comments about the parking situation that I've found has become a problem for our street on Summer Street due to the increased traffic along Water Street and also the Water Dog, which, by the way, I do love. So I love seeing and hearing and smelling the fire pits at night during the summer and going into the fall with the Water Dog restaurant. So I think it's a great add to the town. However, since they've overtaken their parking at that restaurant for seating, we've seen an increased problem with parking on Summer Street. We will see patrons to the restaurant and also other places along Water Street already that will come down, do the 5-point turn down Summer Street, look for a parking spot, take up the residents' parking spots on for the residents of the houses on Summer Street, walk down to the restaurant several hours, come back and leave, and it just happens all night long, especially on the weekend. So again, I want to agree with those that have already spoken about the parking issue. I do have an issue also with the height variance that they're requesting. I think that a slight variance may be reasonable, but this seems a little excessive in my opinion. And the adding of the additional floor is just requiring additional parking spaces, which they don't have room for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob, can I say something? Even if this development doesn't go through, the Water Dog will still remain, correct? So the problems, so what we're speaking of right now is aside from the Water Dog, because that is not going anywhere. Correct?
They're taking away parking.
I understand that, I
Hey,
understand.
why don't we
Okay.
hold Ashley on that?
Yeah.
Um,
So we understand the parking, so it'd be great to be able to move
Well,
on to
yeah,
other concerns.
What our intent here is to take as much information as we can and then look at that in total. Clearly, Water Dog is owned by the same folks who own this, so, and there is a relationship between that existing business and this new development, in terms of, based on the presentation, the relief requested and the relationship of the outdoor seating. So go ahead.
Can we please ask that, we've heard the parking concern, we see that it's a problem. If you agree, just say, I also agree with the parking concern and not continue, or we're going to be here for a very long time.
Good evening.
Hi there.
Eileen Collins. I'm representing the Warren Preservation Society. And my major concern here is that. Okay.
You gotta
Turn it?
There you go.
Okay.
Never been a rock singer, I guess.
Oh, I know. Yes, 26 State Street, Warren, Rhode Island. So, our major concern for 30 years, the Warren Preservation Society has been working very hard to save buildings, educate the public on the historic value of our community. We also have, been able to stop some, I think, very destructive changes to very important buildings downtown. And I think, asking for a demolition of a building right on Water Street or in the district, anywhere actually, is a very important issue that I think needs to be fleshed out. And I know that I have met with my board and, you know, we've decided that we would be willing to spend the money to have a preservation expert on rehabilitation to do a study on the property if we are allowed to do that, we can get permission. I do have another concern that was said that this building was put up for sale, but there were no takers. And I watch the real estate pages constantly. And I've restored 5 buildings in Warren in the downtown area. And we actually met with the owners of this property about 10 years ago and asked if they would be interested in selling. And they were not, and I've never seen it advertised. So I don't believe that it actually has gone on the open market.
I think that's ultimately.
Irrelevant? Okay, well, I'm just bringing that up because
Because we don't know what the history of it is in terms of that, and that's really, that's not the point of this. What we're looking at is what is in front of us. And the option to do a study, I discussed this
Yes.
with you folks.
Yep,
That is at the discretion of the owner that
They have 30 days. If the demolition permit application is submitted, then needs to be referred to the Historic District Commission. They have 30 days to do a report and a recommendation if they choose to. What would a normal
that would
event
be
to the
through-
town council would be.
I guess the important part about that is that, you know, we can do a report, but can we get a second opinion? Like you know,
we are doing
the Historic District Committee doesn't have a preservation consultant on staff
The town
to do
assembly
that.
can review
Yeah.
the-
Plus,
we've asked us to take the structural analysis, all the information that the applicant has given us to do a peer review.
I understand
If
that, Bob.
They determine that that's.
we're gonna need
insufficient
to,
information,
we're gonna need to move along here.
All right, but let me just say one more thing. I have restored buildings that needed structural rehabilitation. And I don't think that an engineer is the person that is going to be able to tell us whether or not this house can be restored. And like I said, I've spent time on 5 different
Right.
buildings, 200 years old.
I appreciate that, and I think what we will do, I will talk more with the folks. We had indicated that a preservation specialist could be included in that
Thank you.
process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. By the way, the fact that we are going on to another meeting gives you an opportunity to put in writing your concerns. Those are shared with the planning board. We read them carefully. As someone who enjoys the printed word and his life work out of most of it, I can tell you that putting it in writing is a good move. It goes on the record. So please think of that. If you feel reticent about speaking in public, or you feel like you didn't get to say everything that you wanted to say, please send that to us. It will go on the record and it will be read. So,
Hi, my name is Jennifer Mello. I am a resident and homeowner at 17 Sisson Street, property adjoining the said property that's being discussed. Clearly, you guys don't want to talk about traffic anymore, but the more people that speak about it, the bigger issue it is. But anyway, we'll move on. Safety. Safety is a big concern. There is no sidewalk on Sisson Street. There is parking on one side of Sisson. When you're turning onto Sisson or turning out of Sisson onto Water Street, blind spots on both sides. Guests from the restaurant do utilize the parking at 99 Water and walk up Sisson, and due to not having a sidewalk, they walk in the street. Sisson Street is only so long. There's also a dead end street. There's no room for turning. There's no turnaround on Sisson. It's down into a driveway, you're out. So for anyone that's not residing on the street, there's no turnaround. There's no way to put traffic in and out of the street other than residents that are currently on the street. There's always been 4 houses. Now we have the additional traffic in from Water Dog. There's always been a restaurant in that location. However, there's always been an extra entrance on Water Street, which was mainly utilized for those purposes. So safety. I pulled onto onto Sisson Street, excuse me, literally turn on. I'm stuck. There's a big truck blocking the road. I'm directed to back up onto Water Street blindly so that I can now cut through 130, 136 to cut through that parking lot to again cut through Water Dog to then access my own driveway. If so, 1, I could have gotten hit backing up onto Water Street. 2, someone could have hit me turning onto Sisson because it's now blind and they can't see me. So they're making a turn. There's nowhere for anyone to go. It's congested. There's absolutely 0 space for one more vehicle to be processed through that street. Never mind 17 apartments in a commercial space. It just doesn't fit. Doesn't fit. There's just no way of making it work in a safe manner. So the question about, is it safe? And people are answering yes. How do you know? You don't live there. You don't experience it day in and day out. So you can't answer yes to that question for state purposes if it is approved because it's safe. No, it's not safe. So in that sense, it does not approve the state for affordable housing.
Thank you. All right.
Hello, John Healy, 776 Main Street. And I lived in town all my life, and I looked at the flyer that was sent out on the size of this building, and I thought it was a joke. It is. I am against the size of the footprint of the building. I'm against the 51-foot height of the building, and I'm against any relief of the already low parking requirements. Most people that have apartments, unless they live alone, have 2 vehicles to get to work. So if you can take the number of apartments and double that, that's what you would need for parking. Myself, I'm a retired fire chief from the city of Providence, and this month I'll have 50 years in the fire service because I started here when I was 16 years old. And you're not going to get the Warren ladder truck down Sisson Street. So the only place you can get to that 51 foot is on Water Street. And you're not getting there either because the primary lines go down the west side of Water Street with 20-some thousand volts usually in the primaries. And you have to keep that aerial ladder 10 feet away from that to protect the people. And the reason why that a lot of towns have a 35-foot height limit is that's the limit of the longest ground ladder that the fire department carries on the ladder truck that can be put up. Some may have a 45, but you need 3/4 of the department to raise it, and you need a lot of room to do that. So that is going to be a very tough place if you have anybody hanging out of a window. And you can say it's sprinkled, but people die of smoke inhalation like that in sprinkled buildings. And a second thing is during the snowstorm that we had, I'm a member of the Mechanics Fire Company on Water Street. We have a parking lot that'll take about 10 cars for the fire department members in back of the building. During the snowstorm, there was 2 guys on the duty crew to man the fire truck. And I wanted to go down and help them and be the 3rd guy. I went on Union Street to the back of the fire station. There was 6 cars and 5 spots on the left, 6 cars and 5 spots on the right. And where you would back out of those, people from the neighborhood filled the whole parking lot with the parking being in effect. And there was no place I could put my car. the two guys on the duty crew shoveled out the grass in front of the station and parked their vehicles on the grass. And so where did I go? I went back home and the truck ran with two guys because I had no place to park. If you go down there right now, there's probably 8 or 10 people in that lot. And there's too much development and not enough parking on Water Street. And we're just continuing to make it worse. Many years ago.
I'm gonna have to,
Yeah,
Hold
well,
your-
many years ago, my father was on the town council here. When somebody came in front of the council, wanted a liquor permit or whatever, they not only asked where you were, they asked how many parking spots you had. That seems to be inconsequential. And with all this outdoor dining that was supposed to be temporary for COVID, we're losing parking spots left and right, because they got tables out there now in fire pits. Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just would add that both the fire chief and the fire marshal are on the technical review committee and approve the project.
Okay.
Well, I would-
No, I'm sorry,
I would
that's
tend to
not,
disagree.
we tried not to have a conversation here.
They can show me how to get the ladder, and I'll see it.
Hi, my name is Sharon Raymond. I live at 155. Hi, I'm Sharon Raymond. I live at 155 Water. I've been impacted by the square peg, water dog, all of that. I love it, but it's a matter of safety. If you want to build these things, you can't ask the town to waive this and waive this, relief of this and relief of that, where we live. It's our town, and it's about safety. That's all.
Thank you.
Hi, Roca Francis, 19 Davis Street. After hearing the presentation, it seems that the pitch is that 15 of these 17 units will be affordable housing. That seems to be the pitch that they want to use to get people to bite at the apple. However, our planner already stated that we're still far below the 10%. There's like, what, 9 communities that even reach that 10% threshold? And that this project isn't really going to move the needle on the number of affordable units in this town. So in terms of the size and the scope of this project for such a small area, when the impact to our affordable housing stock would be nearly negligible, doesn't seem to fit with the character. When we want to talk about affordable housing, I can tell you, because I have two other properties, 39 Water Street, and then the other properties on Main Street at the entrance of Kelly Street. Those have recently been renovated. Those are 4 units at the building on Main Street near Kelly Street and 3 units on Water Street, which I know are 2-bedroom apartments each. Both of those properties are Airbnbs. So that's 7 units, minimum of 10 bedrooms that are not long-term housing available for anybody in the town. But we want to approve this giant scope of a project to help meet our affordable housing needs. It just seems if we have to ask, if the planners, the applicants, have to ask for so many waivers and considerations and variances, then maybe it's not a good fit. It feels like we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And again, it's not in line with the character of the street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, the town is working on an Airbnb ordinance. This is a great concern and should be to everyone in the town, because you lose affordable housing to these operations, which are essentially hotels, as opposed to what they were originally supposed to be. Last time I was at one, I didn't even get the breakfast, so I'm not sure why it's still called an Airbnb. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Leslie Hartwell, and I live at 17 Campbell Street. And my overall feeling, I'm just throwing out something here. You can probably guess which side of the fence I'm on, but if you're willing to accept my feeling is if you're willing to accept this project, this is the beginning of the end. And I don't mean that, you know, the end, but it's the end of the next time a house is deemed infixable and a developer comes along and wants to do something with it that is not part of the Water Street tradition. It's a precedent. It's a precedent that is going to dramatically change, potentially dramatically change Water Street right down the line. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. Yeah, I am, but if you're willing to be part of that, and I fully want to see affordable housing or mixed house, whatever you want to call it. I want to see it. I want the teachers and the firemen and the policemen to live in this town. I want people who grew up in this town to be able to live in this town. All of those things. It just doesn't seem to be the right fit. And I really, not to be cynical and not to point fingers because I don't know the finances of the whole thing. But this is all at the expense of Water Street for the benefit of who's ever doing this. It's great that it's affordable housing, yes. But the person doing this is not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it for their benefit, understandably, they're business people, understandable. But it's just going to happen again and again. And I don't see how you're going to have a leg to stand on if you approve this the next time somebody wants to do this. I went through this whole thing with Blount and Blount wanting to do their expansion.
I'd like to stop you right there.
I will. Okay.
Thanks.
Good.
My name is Sarah Weed. My name is Sarah Weed. I live at 23 Bridge Street. I want to point out to the developers that this project would not be in my backyard, but I do live in the historic district, and the historic district should be of value to all of us because right now it's a big economic asset for the town. I don't think anyone can deny that revenue has come in from selling houses and properties on Water Street, the full length, and also from the businesses that have moved in there. But I feel that Water Street is under attack. Things like the sewage treatment plant, the Town Wharf restroom, Chomp, the Burrs Hill proposed project, and who knows what will happen at Narragansett Electric will devalue the value of Water Street as a historic asset. Any project like this will destroy the historic nature of the streetscape. Especially the height regulation, which other people have mentioned, should not be violated. Delecta's is 35 feet high, as far as I know, and I don't think any building should be built any higher than Delecta's.
Thank you.
Chairman, can we please review the concerns so that we continue to just say like, this is my concern and then move on? So we've heard there's a parking concern. There's nothing.
Doing it.
Because we've heard the same concerns over and over and over.
It's okay. They're actually. Actually, we've heard variations on it and amplifications on what people had to say. So, no, I'm not going to.
I would just like to address the wastewater treatment plant. We were under a consent agreement from DEM to do what we did. So that wasn't an option.
I don't want to get into an argument here.
It's not an argument, it's just fact.
No, it's just, let's just move along. We've been doing very well, I think, here, and I'd like to keep it that way. Okay? Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm Jim Goff. We currently live at 46 Patterson, way on the other side of town. But I lived at Tourister for 3 years prior to 366 days ago. As far as parking, if I was living in the building, I would pretty quickly discover that Tourister's parking is only about 1 minute away. And I can imagine problems with Tourister from that. And the other thing right in the beginning of your presentation, I think you said that you had to take into concern the architectural historic nature of the neighborhood that you were building in to make it compatible. And you said that you proposed that this building was compatible, and I take a great exception to that. Where else in Warren are there 4-story buildings? Never mind in the historic.
On Water.
On Water Street.
Yes.
There's 4-story buildings.
Oh, there is?
Yes.
Okay, I'm wrong, even though, yeah.
But, okay.
Yeah.
Again, what we're trying to do here is to allow people to speak so that we can consider what you have to say. And there is a great deal of valuable information you folks have been providing. So, you know, you're being heard. Thank you.
My name is Ned Connors. I'm an historical preservation consultant, and I've worked on, over 30 years, worked on many, many projects in historic districts.
Excuse me, address the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. 39 Dyer Avenue, Riverside. I commute to Warren. When the Preservation Commission was first established, the Rhode Island Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission in the 1970s, one of the very first districts that jumped to mind to them in their statewide survey of where are the precious cultural resources of this state. And the Warren Waterfront District was one of the very first ones that they set about to survey and document. It remains a remarkable place to this day, and I would argue in no small measure because of the fact that it is a National Register Historic District. And one thing that jumped to mind when the attorney was questioning Mr. Casali was they went through Section E of Title 45, the low and moderate income housing law. And the attorney, walked Mr. Casali through every single point brought up about sewage, pedestrian traffic, everything, but neglected the final one. So if I can briefly read it, there will be no significant negative impacts to the preservation of historical or cultural features that contribute to the attractiveness of the community. I thought that was a stunning I would also like to add that because of the Workforce Housing Initiative funds that are involved in this in terms of funding, that the Rhode Island Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission, I understand from speaking with the acting director, that this project needs to be, they need project notification on this matter because of those Rhode Island housing funds. So I would like to find out if in fact, as of yesterday, Preservation Commission still has no formal notification of this project. And the final thing I would like to add is that we consider seriously the snickering that broke out in this audience when the full elevation of this appalling building was shown. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. Only my first point will mimic. Oh, sorry, Dave Bolster, 53 State Street, Warren. I am also serving on the Historic Commission. Members of the Planning Board. Warren's incredibly intact and diverse historic district, representing every historic period and architectural style since the early 1700s, was first surveyed and documented in 1973. Was then recognized as nationally significant, and the Warren Waterfront National Register Historic District was created in 1974. 30 years later, the Warren Demolition Ordinance was created for the district, quote, in order to preserve the historic fabric of the town of Warren. This was after the almost disastrous proposed demolition of a whole block of historic buildings for a Walgreens drugstore and parking lot. After 3,000 Warren residents signed a petition to oppose this demolition, and the late great lawyer Morphus Jamula refused to sell his property,
the corporation withdrew their application. Warren's historic district was unprotected against the scale of this development, so the demolition ordinance was passed unanimously by the town council. In 2010, developers purchased St. Mark's Church, designed by Rhode Island's most notable architect, Russell Warren, and proposed to demolish it, but the ordinance prevented that from happening. Then the developers proposed demolishing the front portico with the massive fluted columns. The town was not protected against this, so the community rallied to oppose this proposal, and the town council again voted unanimously to strengthen the demolition ordinance to also protect historic exterior features and materials. As you mentioned, written into this ordinance is a provision that provides the Historic Commission 30 days from the date of any demolition permit application to write a report about any proposed demolition within the historic district. The demolition ordinance also contains another provision stating that if someone does not have the financial ability to restore an historic structure within the district, to sell the property to someone who has the ability to restore it. The applicant for this demolition stated at the September 20 Historic Commission meeting that their original intent after purchasing the buildings was to restore them, but that after receiving a report stating that it was financially unfeasible, they decided to demolish them. Unfortunately, the facts tell a different story. The aforementioned report describing the condition of the buildings was completed in September of 2021, 3 full months before the purchase of those buildings in December of 2021. Everyone agrees that these buildings have been neglected, but should not be the buildings or the neighborhood or the historic district to pay the ultimate price for this neglect. The town of Warren and its residents and businesses have invested millions of dollars in 50 years of hard work, as well as passed numerous ordinances to preserve, protect, and restore its historic buildings. Those efforts should never be abandoned, so it is imperative that the town exercise its full authority in controlling its own destiny. Thank you.
My name is Patricia Muse. I live at 47 Broad Street. 47 Broad is a clapboard house built in 1783. That's about 70 years before the building we're talking about knocking down. When my husband and I bought it in 2015, it was a mess. In fact, there were people who suggested the house be demolished. And I believe there would have been engineering firms that would have supported that demolition. But we could see the beauty, so we removed the vinyl siding and windows and renovated it. In spite of heating pipes frozen solid our first winter, holes in the floor, rotting windows, a bathroom that was unusable, and dozens of other major issues. 7 years later, it's a wonderful home. I sit inside sometimes and hear people walk by and admire the color or the windows, or just say it's pretty. Why can't the same thing happen to 119 Water Street? Built about 1852, the Arthur Lochran building has provided a shop and apartments to Warren for 170 years. Since before the Civil War, it's been one of dozens of buildings that form the streetscape of Warren. We all know that people come to Water Street for the shops and the restaurants because they're set on a street that is old and interesting and sometimes odd. Look at Water Dog. I hope that part of its appeal for the owner was the fact that it's a beautiful 18th century building. The same can be said for places up and down the street. Some newly renovated, others a little down in the heels, but all part of the fabric of Water Street, which has remained intact for hundreds of years, with none of the buildings nestled up to the sidewalk and each other demolished. Not one has been torn down in the memory of anyone in this room. I assume Mr. Teodoro, who's not here, is a gentleman of goodwill, that he wants to be part of our community and to do good things. But tearing down 119 without thinking twice is not the way to do that. Before he bought it, he already had an engineer's report that is now his justification for tearing it down. I suggest we begin again and have the house assessed by a firm interested in historic preservation. The Warren Preservation Society has already said they will pay for that, and that's separate from having the town look at what's already been done by the applicant. Let them go through the building and give their opinion of how much it would cost to save it. That could be done within a month, and then we could return and reconsider based on those findings. Arthur Lochran building has been standing for 170 years. I think it's only fair to give it a second chance before we relegate it to the trash heap. Thank you.
Steve Thompson, 51 Broad Street. As a former member of the planning board myself, I want to thank you all for your service, and I appreciate the time and consideration that you have, no doubt, have to put into this issue. I wanted to speak about the height variance issue. So as I recall, when I served on the planning board, variances and things like that were fairly common requests. I don't ever recall hearing of one of this nature. It seems excessive to me. Typically, they're to accommodate things like safety, design, and are within a reasonable threshold. The nature of this particular variance request or related to the height makes me wonder, is the project viable without the variance, that fourth floor? And to me, that is a question that this board should probe further and look at as you're deliberating and making a decision on how to move forward with this. My opinion as a resident of the town is that we should not be granting variances to make projects profitable and developers profitable. We should be doing them for specific reasons consistent with past practice and the law. So thank you for your time and consideration, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Okay.
Good evening, Victoria Gottney, 231 Main Street. I just want to back up what some of the other people have said. I know actually you don't want to hear that, but I do agree with the parking. I agree with the height. It doesn't match with the aesthetic. I have a question about why we should grant all of these waivers. As far as I can see, there aren't any benefits other than to the profit for the applicants. I also just want to underscore the fact that while the board did approve the witnesses as experts, they are not neutral. I just want to make sure that that is clear. They're directly benefiting from this project. Also, I want to point out that while I don't want to discuss whether or not there were prior sales or offers of sale for this property, the issue is, it goes to the credibility of those witnesses. The last thing that I really want to point out is I think someone else mentioned that it seems the pool for this is supposed affordable housing. I think what we learned from the stats earlier is that's not truly affordable. It's just a term that's used by HUD to define a certain spectrum of income and spectrum of housing costs. I work for legal aid, and so I work with actually indigent people. The guidelines that we use are called the Federal Poverty Guidelines. And I just want to mention that for a family of 3, the annual income is about $23,000. That's what being poor actually looks like. And that means that those people are not going to be remotely able to afford any of this housing that is coming in. So I just want to make sure that we are clear that this affordable housing is supposedly the thing that makes it beneficial to Warren, but it's not actually going to benefit us in that way. So my question is, what benefit is there to Warren that is not direct monetary benefit to the applicants? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Dobbin, 22 Liberty Street. There was a presentation here, I think last year by Mr. Rulli about the Market to Medicom corridor and basically his plan for that area. And he put up some slides of envisioned buildings that might go, say, where the Job Lot Plaza is right now, or just generally along Medicom, which is underutilized. There's too much parking. The buildings there are all one story. It basically is asking to be redeveloped. And the pictures that he put up of the buildings looked exactly like the ones that the development group put up tonight. And so it made me think that that would be a great place for them to focus their development efforts. The two sort of paths that Warren seems to be taking is one, preserve Uptown Warren, and two, create housing and redevelop Medicom Avenue. So I think they would slot in perfectly there, as opposed to being sort of a detriment to the historical character of this part of town. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Nothing good happens after 9 o'clock, so I mean. Again, I would ask that if you have thoughts that come to mind between now and our next meeting, put those in writing. We will read them. What you've provided a tremendous amount of information here, heartfelt, and also discerning based on, the fact that some of you live immediately adjacent to this development. So thank you for your participation. I'd like to close the public meeting now. Jim Patterson, Mike, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, and I'd like, you wanted to,
Yeah, did you have any questions?
I don't think so at this point. I think our intent now is to take what we have and come back at our next meeting.
Or if there's comments tonight from the board.
I didn't want to start a process here necessarily, but if are there anything particularly that you felt were not answered by the developer or the representatives?
So when do you want to schedule the next one? Or give a month?
Yeah, it'd be a regularly scheduled meeting in October.
Will we have the Historic District Commission information by then?
Actually, I mean, the question that we had was, my understanding is that Fuss and O'Neill is already engaged in their.
So, I mean, there has been no application for demolition permit filed yet. At such time as an application is submitted, there's 30 days from that date for the Historic District Commission to prepare a report, if they choose to, and a recommendation to the planning board regarding the building.
So when will that be done?
Whenever, I can't speak for the applicant, whether they're going to file an application tomorrow, next week, or 2 weeks. From now.
Okay.
Just laying out what the timeline.
Our job is to.
That's independent of this.
Right, our job is to approve that application or disprove it, whichever, right. Right, okay. Anything else, Ben?
Oh, I think that to acknowledge a couple of emails that the board did get as part of the public record.
We did receive, as I noted at the beginning of the meeting, a number of emails and letters which were distributed to the members of the planning board and which I'm sure we all read. I know I certainly did. And again, we invite anything more or even your testimony tonight, if you'd like to put that in writing. I took notes, but it's can be helpful to have that information in front of you when we're going through this. So that would be it, I think.
Okay, may I just a brief
Yeah.
conclusion? First, I just want to address the fact that one of the speakers mentioned the fact that the applicant is not present tonight. The applicant was present on September 26th His family is moving today, like not from one room to another, but whole house moving. All of those plans were put into place well before the September 26th date. And when the chair offered a continuance to tonight, the three of us, while we were available, he was not able to unravel his plans. We've all moved before, and we can, I'm sure, understand how difficult that is. Okay. So just a couple of points to emphasize here as the board considers this application. First, I want to point out, although our application included a statement of consistency with the comprehensive plan, I think it's important to just emphasize a few germane points out of the comprehensive plan and out of the affordable housing mission. Under the land use element, the comprehensive plan encourages mixed use strategies in the town core, which includes Water Street. Under the economic development element for Water Street, the comprehensive plan calls for allowing flexible uses and modifications that are in character with the prevailing mood on the street. The prevailing mood on the street is a sense, and you've heard it from the testimony here tonight. There's a sense of activity, of jubilance. This project was carefully considered by the design team to fit into not only the architectural mold for what the street presents, but also the vibe of the street.
Yeah, I think, if you can.
Not coming off the paper.
No, I know that. Okay, I mean,
I think,
I mean, you're editorializing a little bit, and that is going into somewhat dangerous ground.
well, I'm actually quoting pieces of the comprehensive permit that I just think ought to be emphasized in your review.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I think you're also, you're
Sure, and
moving it out a little bit.
You're repeating yourself, and we were asked not.
Well,
the development team was silent and respectful for the comments.
I agree.
offered.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Chair.
Let's try and keep it down. We've done a pretty good job so far, let's not embarrass ourselves by letting a few folks just, keep it to yourself.
I want to move this along, Mr. Chair. So just a couple of more points. I think particularly salient to this project is action 2 of strategy 1 under the affordable housing plan, which is to permit multifamily development at densities that are economical for development of affordable housing units that optimize site development. So the second point I'd like to emphasize is that this project it's governed by state law. The state law is the Affordable Housing Act. I'm going to refer to it essentially as the act. If a project is presented that complies with the required findings, complies with the requirements for submittal, then this board has a duty to consider it. And this applicant has put forth an application under that act for a comprehensive permit that checks all the boxes. The act is very specific as to when a commission can deny an application. And the statute talks about essentially 4 reasons. If the proposal is, quote, inconsistent with local needs, including but not limited to the needs identified in the comp plan in the Affordable Housing Act. 2, if the proposal is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The third reason that this board can deny is if the community has met its affordable housing goals. And the fourth reason is if there are environmental and health and safety concerns. So I just want to take each of those very briefly. Okay.
I'd have to say, I think that the statement of those, that is within the comprehensive permit. That's my understanding. That's the findings of fact. So, I mean, the point is well made and I think taken.
And part of the record.
That, you know, that is, you know, that this is not as, it's not business as usual. It's not business as usual for the planning board because we are constrained in part by this comprehensive permit process that was developed at the state level. This transcends our abilities. That doesn't mean that we don't have any say here, nor does it mean that the concerns that have been voiced here are empty. However, it does mean that there is the preponderance of evidence, in fact, is on us, if, as long as you're hitting those points to deny the request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll conclude there.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair and members of the board.
appreciate it. I'd say that would be it. Okay, so there will be a motion to continue this meeting on the master plan review and action. Just the master plan. Mike? Tyler seconds it. All in favor? Aye. And could I have a motion to adjourn?
I made a note. Motion to adjourn.
Okay, Brett and